10 years ago, my neighbor's dog tore apart my garden and he refused to say he was sorry. Later, that same dog was the reason I fell in love with him. My neighbor's name was Thomas. And he moved into the house next to mine back when I still believed in the idea of a friendly neighborhood, the kind where people wave from their porches and bring over pie when someone new arrives. In the beginning, that is more or less what we were, friendly enough, a nod over the fence, a quick word about the weather, nothing deep, but nothing bitter either. Then came the spring his dog got loose. His dog was an old German shepherd named Max, strong and stubborn, the kind of dog that looked gentle until he decided he wanted something on the other side of a fence. That particular afternoon, what he wanted was apparently my backyard, because he pushed straight through a weak spot in the fence line and tore through the vegetable garden I had spent months building from nothing: tomatoes, peppers, a small patch of strawberries I had babied since spring, all of it flattened and dug up and scattered across the grass by the time I got home from work. I remember standing at the edge of that ruined garden for a long time before I even had the energy to be angry, just staring at it, feeling something in my chest sink lower than I expected it to over something as small as vegetables. But it was not really about the vegetables, not entirely. It was about the hours I had put into something quiet and mine, something that felt like it belonged only to me in a life that did not have a lot of things like that anymore. I walked over to Thomas's house that evening and knocked, and when he opened the door, I told him calmly, or at least I tried to sound calm, that his dog had destroyed my entire garden, and that I needed him to actually fix his fence this time, because I had asked him about it once before and nothing had changed. He leaned against the doorframe, and instead of the apology I was expecting, he said something like, "It's just plants, they'll grow back, you're acting like Max robbed a bank." I remember the way he said it, almost amused, like my whole afternoon of grief over something I had built with my own hands was a joke to him, and something in me went cold right there on his porch. I told him that was not the point, that it was never about the plants themselves, and he just shrugged and said he would look at the fence when he had time, which, as it turned out, meant never. That was the moment everything between us changed. Not with a fight, not with shouting, just with a quiet, permanent decision I made standing on his porch that I did not need this man's friendship, and clearly, he did not need mine either. What followed was a long, slow drift into something colder than either of us probably intended at first. The fence stayed broken, and Max kept wandering into my yard whenever he pleased, and every time I brought it up, Thomas treated it like I was overreacting, until eventually I stopped bringing it up at all. I started keeping a quiet mental list instead: every torn-up flower bed, every early morning bark that woke me up while Thomas slept right through it, and each item on that list made it a little easier to stay angry. We stopped even pretending to be friendly after a while. If we passed each other getting the mail, we would look somewhere else entirely, at our shoes, at the sky, anywhere but each other's face. If his trash cans blocked part of my driveway, I stopped saying anything at all. I just backed around them every morning, silently furious, telling myself I did not care enough to say a word about it. There came a point where I genuinely could not remember the last time I had heard his actual voice, and honestly, that felt like a small, strange kind of victory to me at the time, like winning some quiet war neither of us had ever officially declared. The wall between us just kept getting taller over time, not because either of us built it on purpose after that first year, but because neither of us ever tried to tear even a single piece of it back down. I got new neighbors on my other side who I liked, people who waved and meant it, and I told myself that was enough, that not every house on the street needed to feel warm. Thomas, from what little I noticed over the fence line, seemed to live a fairly quiet life too, alone, no family that ever visited as far as I could tell, just him and Max and a porch light that stayed on every night whether or not anyone was actually out there. Eventually, the anger itself wore down into something duller, something closer to habit than real feeling. I did not think about Thomas with rage anymore. Most days I barely thought about him at all. He was just a fact of my life, the quiet, cold man next door who I had decided long ago was not worth my energy. The winter everything changed had been unusually harsh, ice on the roads for weeks, the kind of cold that makes you dread even walking to your own mailbox. The power in our neighborhood had already gone out twice that season, and everyone was on edge waiting for the next storm the news kept warning us about. It was late one night when I heard scratching at my back door, frantic and insistent, unlike anything I had heard before. When I opened it, Max was standing there on my porch, soaked from the freezing rain, shaking badly, whining in a way that did not sound like ordinary dog noise. It sounded almost like distress. Thomas was nowhere in sight, and Max would not stop pacing between my door and the fence line, looking back at me and then toward his own yard, over and over, like he was trying to tell me something I could not yet understand. I grabbed my coat without even thinking twice, some instinct taking over faster than 10 years of built-up resentment could stop it, and I followed Max out into the freezing rain. He led me straight across the yard, through the gap in that same broken fence he had used a decade earlier to destroy my garden, and I remember thinking, even in that moment of panic, how strange it was that the very thing that started our whole feud was now the thing pulling me back toward Thomas's house. His back door was standing open, banging softly against the frame in the wind, and when I stepped inside calling his name, there was no answer at first, just the sound of the storm behind me and my own heartbeat suddenly very loud in my ears. I found him on the kitchen floor, one hand pressed against his chest, his breathing shallow and uneven, his face pale in a way that made my whole body go cold. For one long second I just stood there, frozen, 10 years of silence between us collapsing into nothing in an instant, because none of that mattered anymore, not with him lying there like that. I dropped down beside him and told him to stay with me, that I was calling for help right now, and he managed to nod, his eyes finding mine with something between fear and disbelief, like he could not quite understand why I was the one kneeling beside him. I grabbed the phone off his counter and called for an ambulance, my voice shaking as I gave them the address, while Max paced anxiously beside us, nudging at Thomas's arm every few seconds like he was trying to keep him conscious through sheer will alone. Thomas managed to get out a few words between breaths, something about his chest, about how it had started almost an hour earlier, about how he could not reach the phone once the pain got bad enough. I told him to stop talking and just breathe, and without really thinking about it, I took his hand and held onto it the entire time we waited, something I never imagined I would do for this man after everything that had passed between us. The paramedics arrived and confirmed what I had already feared, that it looked like a heart attack, and that if Max had not gotten help when he did, the outcome could have been very different. I rode along in the ambulance without a second thought, sitting in that hospital hallway still soaked from the storm, staring at nothing, unable to make myself leave even after they told me there was nothing more I could do that night. When Thomas woke up the next day, the first thing he said when he saw me sitting there was that he did not understand why I had come, after everything, after 10 years of barely speaking. I told him his dog would not let me not come, that Max had shown up at my door like he knew exactly who to go to, and for the first time in a decade, I watched something like a real smile cross Thomas's face. He stayed in that hospital for the better part of a week, and I found myself going back every single day, telling myself at first it was only to check on Max, who I had taken in without a second thought the night of the storm. But somewhere along the way, I stopped pretending that was the only reason, because I genuinely wanted to sit in that room and talk to him, which was a sentence I never once expected to think about Thomas. We ended up talking more in that hospital room than we had in the entire decade before it combined. He told me about his wife, who had passed away long before he ever moved in next door, and how the quiet in that house had become so heavy over the years that he genuinely did not know how to let another person back into his life, so instead he had just stopped trying. I told him about my own life, about how it was easier to stay angry at a man over a ruined garden than to admit how alone I actually felt most days, and how that anger had become a strange kind of company all its own. He told me, half laughing, half serious, that he had never even cared about that broken fence, that some stubborn part of him just could not bring himself to apologize once I had already gotten so upset, and the longer he waited, the harder it became to say the words at all, until 10 years had somehow slipped by without him ever managing it. I told him that was, without question, the most honest thing he had ever said to me, and something between us shifted quietly in that moment, small but undeniable. When he came home from the hospital, I started bringing dinner over most evenings, telling myself it was just neighborly, though we both knew by then it had become something more than that. He would sit out on his porch, the same porch where he had once shrugged off my anger without a second thought, and we would talk until it got dark, with Max lying contentedly between our two chairs like he had personally arranged the whole thing and was quietly proud of himself for it. There was an evening, sitting on that same porch, when I finally said out loud what I had been feeling for a while but had not let myself admit. I told him I did not know how I had spent 10 years hating a man who turned out to be exactly the kind of person I had been missing, without even realizing what I had been missing in the first place. He reached over and took my hand, the same way I had taken his in the ambulance that first night, and he told me quietly that he had been waiting a long time to hear me say something like that, longer than I probably realized. We did not rush anything after that. We built it slowly and carefully, the way you rebuild something that actually matters to you. Quiet dinners, slow mornings with coffee on his porch, Max wandering happily back and forth between our two houses like he refused to fully commit to just one home anymore, now that the fence between us hardly mattered at all. On the anniversary of that storm, Thomas asked me to meet him on his porch one evening, and when I got there, he was already down on one knee, Max sitting proudly right beside him, tail thumping against the wooden boards like he understood exactly what was happening and fully approved. Thomas told me that I had saved his life that night, and that he had spent every day since trying to figure out how to deserve that. He said he did not want to spend whatever time he had left in a quiet house alone, not when the loudest, most stubborn woman he had ever met was living right on the other side of a fence that did not even need fixing anymore, because we had finally stopped needing it to keep us apart. I said yes before he even finished asking, and I told him that after 10 years of hating him over a garden, the least he owed me now was a lifetime of actually fixing things when I asked him to. We got married the following spring, right there in his backyard, close enough to my old garden that I planted new tomatoes just for the occasion, if only to see the look on his face. Max walked down the aisle ahead of us, carrying the rings tied carefully to his collar, and when the ceremony ended, Thomas leaned in and whispered that Max deserved more credit for this wedding than either of our own families combined. I told him he was absolutely right, and that if anyone asked, I planned on telling people the dog proposed first.